Welcome, everyone. We will get started in just a minute. As we are waiting for our participants to join us, thank you. Today's session will be recorded and sent out after the webinar, and we will be getting started here in just a second. All right, welcome everyone. Hello, this is the virtual happy half hour for Friday, September 25th. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's 25th already. Today's topic is selling to the C-suite, and this is our 18th, that is correct, our 18th webinar in this virtual happy half hour series. We're 6 months into the pandemic, in case anybody out there needed reminding. And again, we're going to be talking about selling to the C-suite. I am Michelle Richardson. I run our Sales Performance Research Center here at the Brooks Group. I am joined by Russ, our Director of Sales Strategy Effectiveness.
Hi, Michelle. Great to be with everyone again today. I wanted to share a data point that I heard this week. Chiropractors have determined that salespeople are living differently than they used to. I don't have a formal where this came from, but an informal discussion around some chiropractors was that they are treating a lot more neck pain, which comes from being on screen, than they were, 8 months ago, treating back pain that comes from being on airplanes. So recognize that we have all moved our pains closer to our heads, and congratulations everybody for just making it through these 6 months. It's been pretty tough. Today we're going to pick up a subject that has been asked of us a lot here at the Brooks Group. How do I sell to the C-suite? We've spoken about the need to get higher in accounts, and with kind of all the things that have happened around COVID, how the C-level executives are more involved in decisions, really making sure that things align with key missions. So today we're going to give you some ideas and some thoughts around what it really means to be successful in terms of selling to the C-suite. First, kind of what's happening in terms of the data we're seeing about C-suite involvement in deals. And then a little bit about how do you get your team ready, or how can you tell if your team is ready to be able to take on the C-suite. As always, if you'd like, we'd love to get your comments and questions via the chat screen or the Q&A, either one of those. If you'll just go ahead and send us the questions, we'll be sure and try and get those answered before we wrap up today. So Michelle, what have you learned about what's happening with C-level executives?
Well, thank you, Russ. Let's talk some data. And, the C-suite impact has been huge. As you said, we've been talking about it quite a bit throughout the pandemic. It's not unique to the pandemic because selling to the C-suite has been critical since the beginning of time. However, one of the most consistent trends that we have seen over the past 6 months is this increase in C-suite participation. So I'm going to share some data with you from Chorus. They are a conversation intelligence kind of technology firm, and they put out weekly briefings. So this is all information that came out last week as of September 17th. C-suite participation on the buying side is up an average of 80% since the beginning of this year. So pre-pandemic to now, 80% increase in C-suite participation. CEOs and CFOs are 71% more common on sales calls now than tactical leaders. So these are the economic decision makers. These are the ones that control the budget, and they are getting involved more often. Some good news, the silver lining here, win rates increased by 38% when the C-suite is involved in the buying process. And again, we're getting that those folks with the ability and the authority to buy, to quote our qualifying characteristics from impact selling. And C-suite stakeholders talk 8.5% more on closed won deals. And I think this is a really important data point. So when deals are won, the C-suite representatives are talking more. And to add to that, deals that progress to the next stage include 5 engaging questions asked by the rep to that C-suite stakeholder. So I think there's a connection there. The reps are asking engaging questions, the stakeholders are talking more, and I think we can surmise that the salespeople are learning more about objectives and strategies from the C-suite. So we know that the C-suite is much more involved, right? So they're more present in sales calls these days, but what's the mindset that's really driving their decision making? Russ and I had the opportunity a week or so ago to speak with Sharon Gillenwater. Sharon is the CEO and co-founder of Boardroom Insiders. They are an executive intelligence firm. They create executive profiles. They have business intelligence, a technology platform really designed to help sales organizations and marketing organizations understand what drives C-suite decisions. And one of the things that we talked about, and this was actually reflected in one of their recent blogs, is the uncertainty gap. So the C-suite right now, and particularly CEOs, are really dealing with this lingering uncertainty, as we all are. But we're 6 months into this pandemic, and the only constant is change. So for your sales reps, as they are talking to the C-suite, as they are planning for these sales calls, think about what you can do that can help bring some element of clarity. So consider peer-to-peer calls with your own C-suite. Consider case studies or insights that you have learned from dealing with your other customers. Executives are seeking that information and really trying to figure out what does the next normal look like. So thinking like a startup. This is actually a phrase from a Deloitte article that's from August, and it is also something that Sharon and Russ and I talked about, which is C-level individuals now are thinking about what does the next normal look like? What does our business model need to look like? They have some time to really strategize. How do they retool their organizations? How do they retool their product lines to really fit what the market needs right away? So again, as a salesperson, as a sales team, what do you have to offer, or how can you position yourself and your offerings to really drive that innovation?
And I think the key thing that I learned from that, Michelle, just to add a point here is
sure.
The C-level executives are looking at not just little changes like, okay, can I get a smaller, better discount on this, or can you pay me better terms here? They're looking for, how do I improve the process? How do I more effectively do a piece of business either in fewer steps, or can I automate part of it? Can I move part of the transaction online so that the customer can do it? We're seeing a lot of data around people wanting to place orders and receive updates and everything digitally without talking to someone. So they're thinking at that higher level in terms of how do I really optimize the process of my business as I rethink, you know, if I'm a startup and redesigning or redeveloping every process.
Exactly, and I think that's, you mentioned a really important word or phrase there, which is thinking at the strategic level. So they're thinking big picture and not the tactical elements. Absolutely. The other thing, and again, this was mentioned in the Deloitte article as well, but balancing offense and defense. So early in the pandemic, C-level executives were really on the defense. How do we support our organizations? How do we keep them afloat? You know, they were dealing with issues such as furloughs and profitability. And now they're also looking at how do we play offense? So how do we take advantage of opportunities that the pandemic may be presenting? And that's kind of an interesting way to look at things. But how do we, again, from a strategic level, how do we innovate? How do we digitize? How do we take advantage of opportunities to really come out not only just surviving, but really thriving in the next order, in the next normal? And so from a sales organizational standpoint, what can you do to help fill that uncertainty gap? Can you bring clarity? Can you help shore up an organization's defense, or can you help them play offense and contribute to that innovation? And really the best way to understand where your customer base is coming from is to ask questions, to engage in conversations at that strategic level.
Yeah, we're going to talk some more about that, but just one other thing to touch on that, Michelle, is the larger organizations are also thinking about sort of that, how do I come out of this at two levels? One, how do I deal with today, which is going to go from sort of where we are. You said originally they were all about, so like just how do we survive? And now we're in this mid-normal, let's call it, where there's the concern we have today until things are different. And right now, everything I'm reading says that may be Q2, it may be Q3, but somewhere we're hoping back in 2021 to be able to go out and have interactions with folks. That's got one scope on their business. And then the next scope is what happens beyond that? How do we get ourselves positioned where so many of our competitors have struggled or gone out of business or have changed a lot of their production? How do we make sure we're really ready to move forward with that? Now, one of the things I forgot to do up front was talk about our sponsor. So I will get a slap on the wrist for that. But our sponsor today is Virtual Selling with Impact, and Michelle has some more information on that.
Absolutely. We're going to let you off this time with just a small reprimand, Russ. But as he said, our sponsor for this session is Virtual Selling with Impact. So we've already shared some data on selling to the C-suite. Russ is getting ready to provide you with some practical strategies that you can implement with your teams. But if you are seeing more C-suite involvement, and if you really feel that you and your team need more practice in adapting your conversations, getting to that strategic level, then we hope you'll consider our Virtual Selling with Impact program. So this is 6 two-hour sessions that not only address the technology aspects of our current reality selling virtually, but also how to make the most of every sales interaction. And when that's whether you're talking to the CEO or the CFO or a plant manager or a purchasing agent. So we're going to put those two components together and give you a really well-rounded selling program. So for more information, please email contact@thebrooksgroup.com, and producer Tracy has posted a link in the chat box. We have open enrollment sessions starting on October 5th. We also have them in November on the 2nd and the 30th. We can also bring it into your entire sales organization. So we hope that you will take advantage of that opportunity. So Russ, I am dying to know about this conversation on an airplane.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, let me start by just saying that not every sales organization should be calling on the C-suite. We're going to give you some ideas around how you fit strategically with organizations and with their business. And if you can't figure out a way to do that, I would strongly encourage you not to send your team rushing into it. A conversation on an airplane. This comes from a real life situation that I had. We were flying home from, it was on a flight from Denver to my hometown. And I struck up a conversation with the fellow sitting in the aisle seat. There was an empty seat behind us, and I was in the window. And it turned out that he was the retired CEO of a very large utility here in Southern California. And he was returning from a board meeting in Denver. We struck up the idea that I did sales training, and he said, you know, we just had a board meeting, and our VP of sales came in and said, I've instructed all of my sales team to immediately go call on the CEOs of all of our customers. And his word was, I cautioned the VP of sales. He said, let me tell you my reality as a CEO of a large utility. He said, when I took a meeting with somebody, they had about 3 to 5 minutes to convince me of one thing or the other. He said, you wouldn't believe how many people came in there and immediately started talking to me in their normal customer product pitch. They started talking about a product that they wanted to sell me. He said, if that was the case, the meeting wrapped up pretty quickly, and they never got not only in my office, but not even to the C-suite floor again as long as I was around. He said, however, those who came in and had conversations about my business, my strategy, the issues that I was facing and how they could help me overcome those, they were the ones who got to come back, continue the conversation, and the ones that I saw as adding value. And so the whole thing to remember about this conversation on an airplane is when you walk in, it is a different selling environment than most of the time your people sell to. And this next slide kind of shows that. We have a thing that we talk about in Impact, which is kind of what's their role and what's their rationale for buying. And you'll see that C-suite is thinking strategically. Lower in the organization, they have small pain points. They're asking you to solve problems that are there, or maybe be able to make something easier. At the middle level, they're looking for things that may cause a little bit of pain in the organization, but they're going to get better results because of it. But because of the roles they have, C-suite people have to be thinking about how does this align with where I want the organization to go, either in this mid-normal period or in the new normal approach. And they're willing to take some pain for gain, but they really want more partners than they want vendors. The thing I love about selling to the C-suite is it gives you the ability to understand and communicate how you understand their business, and to be able to look at how your maybe return on investment or the benefit you bring goes across multiple groups inside the organization. For example, we've been working with a client recently that sells a product. They're not the lowest price solution in their marketplace, but what they are able to do is help reduce the overall labor costs in the project. So if a buyer is just focused on, boy, your material is 10% or 15% more than your competitor, the higher you get in the organization, the more you can look at the overall profitability of projects and address those issues because they care. Another thing that we're seeing is that a lot of times it's around the logistics that become a value. So, we have local stock. We have the ability to allow you to pull. We're never going to cause one of your factories to shut down because of lack of just-in-time inventory. It's been a huge issue with COVID and sort of the changes in supply chain. But those are the kinds of things that they want to talk about. They don't typically want to talk about a product. So think, as we said earlier, about process change, about how you give them the ability to have better control, or how you have the ability to be better from a digital perspective. And I would just say that while that seems obvious, I have been on multiple sales calls with senior level salespeople who begin the presentation not at a strategic level, but way down in the weeds. And it destroys me when I'm sitting in and talking about that. So what does that look like? Here's a conversation that one of our customers had. They were a supplier to a very large, one of their top 2 accounts. And the customer had told them that they were getting ready to do an RFP to put that piece of the business out for bid, that they saw them as a supplier. The product, while it has unique capabilities, they had some fairly robust competitors. And the night before, the week before the meeting, the VP of sales of our customer went through and read the annual report for that company. And he read the strategic objectives that the CEO had written in the letter to the shareholders. And so in the time of that presentation, they didn't talk about a discount here, a discount there, whatever. But he said, let me explain to you how we as a partner can help you to achieve your goals around growth, your goals around service times, your goals around sustainability. And by the end of that presentation, they changed the CEO's mind from, we're not going to take this out to bid, we're going to work with you because you're aligned with us as a partner. And so one of the questions that came up is, what's a good door opening strategy to secure appointments with the C-suite? I think that number one is that idea of understanding how you align strategically with them. Number 2 is asking your executives to be involved in the approach potentially, because C-suite people like to talk to C-suite people, and that you make an offer that is appealing to what you know about their industry and where you're going to help them. So if you read their annual report, if they're public, or you look at the things they've written in their blog posts or the things maybe they've said at investor conferences, and they're able to communicate in a way that you can help them solve that problem, that's a way to get their interest and to start that, to get the conversation flowing. So one of the things that Michelle and I learned from boardroom reports, I asked the question how they were different, or boardroom insiders, how they were different than LinkedIn. And they said, well, we really kind of look at the information of what they've said publicly, so we understand what's top of mind with their C-level executives, and therefore allow you to craft an offer to go in and speak to that level. So what are some skills basically that are needed to be able to be here? We believe that it starts with really your sales team or your salesperson being seen as a trusted advisor, somebody who can walk in and have a conversation with a C-level person. And a lot of times that starts with business reviews, where you go in and you present to not just the folks you work with, but also higher level folks, how you're doing in terms of the relationship, the good and the bad. Because the minute you talk about the problems you're having, the minute you build trust with that, hey, this isn't somebody who's just only trying to sugarcoat our relationship, but really looking for how they can fit longer term. And then kind of three key: understand their business, understand how they make money, understand where their levers are to the degree that you can. Talk to your current customer, current contacts, your internal advocates, and really try to understand what that looks like. Second of all, understanding how closely you align to their profitability. I was on a call one time in the lighting industry, and the particular piece of product that we were selling, a power supply, was more expensive. It was probably 20% more expensive than competitive products. But what we learned through the conversation was that our failure rate was significantly less than the lower cost competitor. And as a result, as we sat and had a conversation strategically, they were telling us they wanted to reduce warranty costs. They wanted to be able to reduce what it costs them to go out and fix broken products. And so the desire to save money overall allowed them to pay more on a per piece basis. And the more we focused on reducing warranty, the more successful we were. The more we focused just on price per unit in other parts of the organization, the less successful we were in terms of being successful. And then, like I said earlier, you want to work on the partnership, on finding strategic alignment, on having a business conversation, not selling first. Somebody commented in the chat window, it's, talk strategy first, not product. You've got to make sure your team can, first of all, have a strategy conversation. They're capable of that. And then being able to explore lots of different areas, maybe outside of your normal business, that would help you be able to come together and work as a strategic partner. What that requires, if we move on, is to look at how have I prepared to do this? I've got a pre-call plan that I'm going in on. But some other things, understanding of the business model. We already talked about that, either through the internal advocate, through public records. If you're working in Europe, a lot of the European vendors have to publish, even private companies have to publish financials now and then, so you can dig in and work with those. You can also talk to non-competitive salespeople. They're also frequently a good source to be able to get information on a business. Make sure that you've prepared proper questions, sort of 3 to 5 well-honed questions. Michelle shared earlier that CXOs are involved 8.5% of the time more. They talk more on deals that are closed won. And I believe that's directly an effect of asking good questions and getting them answered. And don't ask the stereotypical old, like, what keeps you up at night? And don't think about it as one question strategically and then immediately drop into selling your product. You've got to use creativity and intelligence to ask questions. You've got to look at what they've done and said, based on everything I've learned, you've been growing at a significant rate over the last few years. What are the things that are in front of you in terms of how you keep that growth going? Or, I understand from your initiatives, you're looking more at moving into green sustainability. What are the main points that you're focused on, in terms of internal operations that are key to being able to achieve those goals? You want questions that are, again, aligning with them strategically. And then, once you ask a question, what's really critical is to be able to listen. Harvard Research recently published a study that said that people who listen better are deemed to have more credibility. And so you've got to train your people to ask the question and then step back and be quiet and move forward. What's the offer? The offer that you're trying to make is something that addresses those strategic initiatives that they're on, and it takes some work. This is where you've got to work around it. What we're seeing most successful now, as I said earlier, those that have to do with logistics or other costs on either their income statement or their balance sheet that may not be directly affected with cost of goods, but are looking at overall operation. We worked with a client not long ago who had a product that had superior wear that allowed their manufacturing lines to stay up and running long. They could have fewer stops for production. And that was a huge win for them. And so you want to be thinking about the entire delivery service. And that may take multiple people in your organization to think through and brainstorm that. And then last, there's a benefit to having a VP or a C-level person reach out and make that first contact. And it's not so critical, I think, in terms of whether it's phone or email, but it's who it comes from. If it's coming from an account manager, the chance of getting the reply is significantly less than if it's your CEO or your CFO or whoever it is that's reaching out from their perspective. They have a peer-to-peer credibility that sometimes, unfortunately, salespeople or account people can't have. And if you can have them along with the meeting, just all that much greater. One of the other things, though, that does continue to work if you're not having luck through sort of email and phone is to be able to work with either snail mail or overnight delivery services. We've said this before, but FedEx envelopes, UPS packages, those are still getting opened. It's a great way for you to be able to communicate the seriousness of what you want as well as the offer that you want to make. And then the last piece here that's not shown as a separate bullet, but you really want to have good follow-up. Something where you've thought through the conversation, where maybe you bring some additional ideas in terms of what you're able to discuss. Maybe another kind of, after you've thought about it and come back and talked with your staff, here's another thing that we could potentially work on together. Don't just walk out of that meeting and send data sheets. And for a lot of you, that's going to be obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times C-suite people are always approached with like, okay, we had a great conversation. Now let me drop back into my old sort of like selling to the purchasing people kind of mode. Those are the kinds of best practices that we're seeing right now in the industry for people who are trying to get to C-suites. We'll take a minute and ask if you've got any additional questions that we want to answer. Somebody asked a question, Michelle, about slides. We'll post the replay on the on our website and send it out as a part of this as well. Here's my 3-point checklist, just as you're thinking of your questions. Before you approach, can we have a meaningful conversation about their business? If not, don't rush in. You only get one time to make a first impression, so make sure you can do that. Second of all, does my offer, does what I want to talk about, does what I think is going to be the issue line up with one or more of their strategic objectives? And if you get into the meeting and they start talking about things you aren't prepared for and aren't ready for, it's totally fine to say, you know what, I think we've got some things that we can do to talk about and talk about them in general, but say, I'd love to come back to you with specifics. Don't say, well, hey, those are interesting, but here's what I prepared for, so let me go ahead and work on this. And then the last one is, will my C-suite support the initiative? You should engage your team for 2 reasons, by the way. One, because it helps you get in, but second of all, it helps them learn about the business and what's going on and what's working. I had a question come in about a brand new account. Should my focus be on targeting the user department, C-level, et cetera, et cetera? Tough to say without knowing sort of more about the impact that you have. But in general, the rule is if you have a good offer to make, the higher you can start in an organization, the better. It's a lot easier to be handed down the organization than it is to work your way up. And so a best practice is to try and start at the highest level where they're going to see real benefit from a partnership with you. And again, define what you mean by partnership. A lot of people say, oh, well, we want to be your partner. Well, what does that mean? Well, we want to sell you a lot of stuff. That's not a partner. A partner is when you're solving problems for them and over time you build loyalty. Good practices for uncovering unknown needs. Talking to their people, looking at anything they've published, blog posts, news reports, any filings they've had. In certain industries, people have to file with the government about problems or successes they've had. Look at turnover. How often, how consistent is the C-suite? Look at LinkedIn. There are a whole series of groups that you could join that address their industry, that allow you to see in general what's happening. Talk to your existing customers who are similar. And all of those things you're going to bring together in a way that says, I know something about your business. And even if your first suggestion of an offer isn't dead on the number one they need, if you've done the work to say, look, we work with a number of folks in your industry and they're seeing this move towards digitization, or they're seeing this move towards simplified logistics as being important to their ongoing success. We've been working with companies to do that. We'd love to come in and have a conversation about your planning to see if we could do that. That idea of getting close is important. And then if they walk in and you have the conversation and that's third on their list of priorities, you can always change in the meeting and think about how you readjust to that. Those are the questions we've got, I think, so far.
What? And while we see if there's any lingering questions, just to let you all know, our next session will be on Friday, October 16th. So we're actually 3 weeks rather than 2 weeks. And we have a new survey going out, and we'll actually have a link to the survey in the email that you get today with the recording of today's webinar. So the topic for our next webinar will come from that survey. We'd want to see how everyone's doing, how the quarter is going, what the end of the year looks like, and plans for 2021. So we'd encourage you to take that survey when you get the link as well.
Right. And we'd also encourage you to forward the email to people you think would be interested in this topic and other topics. We always are looking for people who want to spend a half hour in our virtual happy half hour.
And it looks like that's it.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great couple of weeks, or 3 weeks, I guess. And we'll see you again October 16th.
Wonderful. Thank you.